All right, I think I'll get started. I have some announcements to make before we get into Jason's presentation. So that'll help more people trickle into the meeting today. Today's discussion is going to be on integrated lighting design. But before we get into the details of that, um, well, I need my computer to work. We have some upcoming events that I would like everybody to be aware of. The big one is home tours. So home tours is going to occur on July 9th. It's going to happen from 10 to 4, and that is a Saturday. We have 3 homes in the tour. Los Altos Hills, and Atherton are where the homes are located. We are looking for volunteers, and the advantage of being a volunteer is that you work half of the day in one of these beautiful homes, and then the rest of the day you have a ticket to go see the other homes. So participating in it gives you free ticket, but also you get to spend some time in one of these homes. And docent responsibilities is really there to make sure people aren't opening cabinets and going into rooms or areas that have been closed off on the tour. You're not answering any questions about that. The architect for the project will be in the kitchen. So anybody asks you any questions about the design or products or materials that are in there, you can just direct them to the kitchen. And we don't make people stay in one corner all day long. Everybody gets to move around to all the stations during their shift. So you will actually get a good look at the house that you're in that day. So I'm going to, when the session gets started, I'm going to go ahead and put in the link into the chat for volunteering for home tours. And then the only other responsibility for docents for the home tours is to attend the training session, which is next Friday, June 17th from 12 to 1. We'll really go into the details about what we're asking of our volunteers. The next event is an incredibly vital event for any member of the chapter who is in good voting standing. Pretty much if you're AIA, Associate AIA, member FAIA, you can vote, and we'll need your vote on making a decision as to whether this chapter, once the pandemic is over, will be able to continue using digital voting in our meetings. We have been having a lot of difficulty when we have in-person meetings of getting quorum from the entire membership. And we're hoping that moving towards digital voting will allow more people to attend. So this is a digital vote to change the bylaws in order to allow us to vote permanently. And the reason that we have to change the bylaws is that right now during the pandemic, the state of California is allowing us to do this. We don't know how long the state will allow us, because previously the state law would not allow us to do digital voting. The vote will be open all day so that you can just pop in at any time and do your vote. But please, if you are a member in good standing, please sign up for this meeting. And you should have received an email with the link and all the information. Okay, next month when we get together, we're going to talk about what's new in 2022, Title 24, Part 6 for residential structures. This will not have a learning unit. It's going to be a discussion based on what we've learned from Energy Code ACE's presentation and done in May. I have the full workbook, so I'll be able to show you all the slides and we can have a discussion or any questions, answers. Everybody can have a dialogue about what's coming next year. We're going to focus mostly on single family homes, but the coursework did do multifamily homes as well. And what is that course? Well, if you weren't able to attend the course in May, they are doing it again in July directly through Energy Code ACE. On Monday, July 11th from 1 to 3:30 for the entire presentation. Again, once I'm done showing my slides, I'll pop in to the chat the links for these sessions that are coming up. And so now we're going to move on to today's program on integrated lighting. And I would like to introduce everybody to our speaker, Jason Sayin. And Jason, please take it away. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then you can share yours.
Right.
Okay, except my mouse doesn't want to work. There we go.
Perfect. So before we get started, this is presented by Haven and Wire. So I'll let Fernando kind of do a quick intro and then I'll continue with teaching the course.
I'd just say, hey, folks, some of you we may have met or are introduced before, so I'll keep it brief. We're just a home technology integrator. We're a contractor here in the Bay Area, and where our focus is, home lifestyle technologies like lighting. So that's why we thought it would be a good fit to have Jason speak to this group today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, my name is Jason San. So my role is I'm a manufacturer's rep, and I'm based out of Florida. So we cover the state of Florida. We work with companies like Haven and Wire to help on selling and training the home technology products that you've either used or seen in some of your clients' homes. And we are a member of CEDIA, which is our trade organization. CEDIA is a worldwide international organization that trains companies like Haven and Wire on products and installation techniques. We have trade shows every year, and we also are outreach instructors. And so we provide outreach education to the design build community, which is what we're doing here today. And so today's course is Introduction to Integrated Lighting Design. And so although we're going to focus specifically on lighting at the end when we have time for questions, if any of you have questions about technology in the home, maybe you had a bad experience with a project, or maybe you're looking to learn about something that we're not talking about, feel free to ask those questions. As I was telling Jennifer when a lot of you joined, the challenge we have is we don't get brought into the projects early enough. And so we can't specify the right solutions that's really going to satisfy the client. So the example I like to give is here in South Florida, we have condos with floor to ceiling views from the master bedroom of the ocean. Obviously, the client doesn't want to disrupt that, but they want to watch TV. And so we can solve that problem. We can have the TV come out of the ceiling. We can have it come out from under the bed. Maybe it motorizes out of a cabinet that matches the furniture at the foot of the bed. But if we're not involved early, we can't help with, drawings for framing, electrical and cooling and ventilation. And I use that idea with every one of these courses. And about a month ago, I was with an architect and they were laughing/crying because literally they were on a project where they're having to build a box to bolt to the ceiling to hide a projector. So you can imagine a client buying a condo like this with concrete ceilings and, now they're having to bolt a box on it. And so that's why we do these courses, to really help educate everyone on what's available, but also so that you have a resource in Haven and Wire. Even if the project isn't happening for a couple of years, technology changes fast, but we can at least guide you in the right direction. And so that's really the focus on all these courses. So you will be earning credits for today. So how the credits are going to work is the team at Haven and Wire is going to send you an email with 2 links. And each of those links, one is to register, confirm that you attended today. The other one is evaluation on the presentation. Once you complete those, CEDIA will submit them to AIA to issue your credits. We will also follow up, 5 to 7 days after with a certificate. So you will have that certificate as well as proof. So lighting plays a really critical role in room design, whether you're trying to showcase a piece of art or a piece of furniture, or maybe have a scene, with the right setting, right dimming levels for a dinner party, it can really affect the feel of the room and the vibe. And people do not realize how technology can actually enhance that, aside from just lighting design in general. So today we really want to focus a little bit on lighting design techniques, and also then talk about how technology can be tied in with that lighting design technique to really enhance the experience of lighting. And it's not just with fixtures. We've had so many advancements in technology over the last year or two, or longer than that, but in the last year or two, it's really been coming up a lot in our space in terms of like circadian rhythm lighting and color temperatures. So we're going to talk about that today as well. So main core learning objectives, we're going to talk about the 4 different types of lighting. We're going to differentiate between the different lighting design techniques that a lot of lighting designers use. We're going to talk about the role quality plays into lighting design. A lot of times, the common terminology is four cans and a fan in a room. And these lights that are going in the ceiling are just really inexpensive, Home Depot low specials, and they're going into like $1 million homes. So we want to talk about, some factors and features of quality light fixtures. We're going to talk about some of the design considerations to lay out on plans when you're looking at integrating lighting, and then, talk about, again, identifying a technology professional. We always say it's never too early to bring us involved, especially with lighting, audio and video, not that it can be brought in later, but lighting is pretty critical. Like, it's lighting and plumbing is like the first two trades that are brought into a project. And if we get brought in too late, trying to change the lighting over to something that has, color technologies or needs control can really disrupt the process. So the earlier we're brought in, we can specify some of the ideas. We can bring up those enhancements earlier. So why is lighting important? And Jennifer, I'm not looking at the chat, so if a question comes up, feel free to interrupt me if it's something relevant. But by all means, you can unmute yourselves also. I encourage participation versus just a talking PowerPoint, especially when it's virtually. But this is a good example of why lighting is important, right? It illuminates the space, it creates a vibe, and it's not just the light that comes from the ceiling or the accent lighting. So if you start to look around this space, we have, lighting in the shelf and the wall next to the bathtub. We have a fire feature. There's some decorative lighting above the bed. There's lighting in a coffer on the ceiling. All of this contributes to illuminating the space and helping with the design. And also from the other perspective, and we don't talk about it much in this presentation, but if you look at all the different textures and finishes, interior designers go through a ton of work, coming up with this concept with materials and finishes and, layering all the different colors. And no matter what they do, if there's poor lighting, it can actually alter that effect. I mean, I've heard horror stories of clients that have gone to a stone yard, picked out a piece of marble or granite outside, and then it gets installed and they put in poor lights and it totally changes the effect and look of the actual material. So lighting is important for a number of factors. So let's take a look at basic lighting. So this is typically what we see on a lot of projects, unfortunately, even in a space in a really inexpensive home. Somebody just looks at the ceiling and kind of just, lines it up with all the different types of fixtures, and they're trying to highlight specific areas, right? The dining room area, the under counter, and then just illuminating the space overall. And it doesn't look awful until you compare it to another type of lighting with proper lighting design. So when you look at this video, you see we use less lights in the ceiling, but we've concentrated more of a focus in the main area, especially standing afar. It really highlights that kitchen. And then you have the wall features are now accented. So it really transforms the space, and it doesn't necessarily illuminate it differently from the standpoint of, not being able to function in or around the room, but now everything's highlighted specifically, the vase on the table, the wall with the textured finish, which was hard to see earlier, the adjacent walls, and the kitchen area is still illuminated from the same perspective in terms of for working and functioning. So those are the two differences, and it really, in this point, comes down to the different types of lighting design. So 4 main types of lighting that designers are concerned with is you have your task lighting, your ambient lighting, your decorative lighting, your accent lighting. Some of this is a little self-explanatory. Task lighting is basically what it sounds like. You're lighting a space to do a task, but it's actually more about contrast. So the light's focused in the area you're working, and you don't have light focused in the other area. So contrast plays an important role. Ambient lighting is more the lighting that's lighting up the space. So you think of in-ceiling lights or maybe coffer lights, but this is illuminating the actual space so you can kind of see and navigate around the area. Decorative lighting, again, similar to task lighting, it's basically for decoration in the space. Now, it kind of becomes a task light. So if you have this decorative lamp next to a chair, that might be a reading lamp. And even though it is performing a task, it's also more of a decorative feature in the space. And then you have accent lighting, which is where you're trying to highlight something. Like in that previous slide, we saw that vase on the table get highlighted, and that was using accent lighting. So these are the 4 main types that designers use. And unfortunately, a lot of times, what gets designed is more of an ambient lighting, and the rest of them are kind of an afterthought, and it can totally change the perspective of the project. So again, if we look at those 4 features and we take a look at a space such as this, this is a beautiful house, and you see all the different types are used here. So you see the decorative light fixture hanging from the ceiling, which helps with our depth and perspective of how high up that ceiling is. And it also changes it from being some big wide open space to this, illuminated space with depth and texture. And then you see the other types of accent lighting and ambient lighting throughout the space on the walls and the ceiling underneath the staircases. So this was a good use of all the different types of lighting. So layering is a technique that's typically used in a space to really grab the attention. And we saw this in the very, very first slide, where all those different types of lighting design styles that I talked about, from ambient to accent to task, are being used here. So, we have some in-ceiling lights to light the space. We have a coffer light in the ceiling to also light the space. And then we have some task/decorative lighting. I would call more task lighting on the end tables there, so you can read a book at night. And then you have more decorative lighting in the hallway there, where you have this really kind of funky modern, LED type strip that's mounted in the wall and towards the ceiling. So by layering all these different types, we've actually created a different kind of ambiance in the space versus if we just had a bunch of, lights in the ceiling. So downlighting is your typical type of ambient lighting. Now, within this category, there's numerous options. In this example, we're seeing something that's become very popular over the last couple of years, which is a trimless type fixture. So there's a lot of fixture companies out there that offer trimless fixtures, and they come in different sizes. They come in different shapes, and they have like pre-construction brackets that they use so that they can, mud and drywall up to them, but it gives a nice modern and clean look. But typically the downlights is what's used with ambient type lighting. A lot of times they're misused, they're over specified, and you end up with too many. Less is actually more in this case if you're doing some of the layering lighting by bringing in some of the, accent and other types of fixtures into the space. So uplighting, and this is a new trend/technique we're seeing. And basically this is where we're kind of doing a wall wash effect here, but we're also lighting the pathway. There's a lot of careful planning that has to go into this, obviously, especially when we're in this scenario, we're putting the fixtures inside of the wood flooring. But this is a really good technique to illuminate an area, but at the same time, it's kind of like an accent light where it's really highlighting the finish of the stone wall that we have there. And then wall washing is another technique. So here you have like a really rich color and design of a wallpaper in the space. And we're using the wall wash lighting to actually highlight it even further and kind of accent it in this zone. And then we also have decorative lighting on the sides to help illuminate the space. The floor washing is another technique/trend that we've been seeing. And this is where, instead of uplighting on the wall, we're actually splashing down onto the pathway. We see it a lot more in the outside area, but we see it in some of the large homes where we have walkways and pathways. And at nighttime, this can help illuminate the space. And again, talking about technology, if we had something as simple as a motion sensor in this area, that motion sensor can turn these lights on. So we don't have to worry about turning them on and off at different times. It can actually be triggered from a motion sensor, which helps with security issues from a, not security necessarily, safety issue, or so someone's not tripping and falling. But you can also see where it really adds a really nice feel to this area. You light up the pathway, you light up the stone walls. So again, another reason why we should be involved early, because there's a lot of design that has to come into doing this floor washing, from making sure things are installed properly in the stone, but also paying attention to furniture layouts so that lights are not going to get installed in areas where there might be furniture. Not necessarily in this case, but maybe in another type of example. So ceiling coffers, again, these have been around for years, but we've seen kind of some new trends here, especially with advancements in LED tape lighting. So a lot of times inside these ceilings, back in the 80s, they were using fluorescent tubes, but now we're able to use LED tape lighting to actually illuminate the space. So this is being used from an ambience perspective. And with advancements in WRGB and tunable white, which we'll talk about a little bit later, we can really add some dramatic effects here. This really only works good though if you have a light colored ceiling. Dark colored ceilings really don't work well in this type of application. And there's actually some new products that are out there from a few fixture companies where instead of bringing a coffer in, they actually have products that can get mudded into the drywall, which has a coffer in it. So we're kind of like flushing in a channel into the wall or ceiling to hide the LED tape, which gives you a little bit more modern look. So again, there's a lot of really cool new products that are out there. Track and linear lighting, track lighting's been around for years. And again, advancements. It's hard to tell from this photo, but that track is actually flushed in the ceiling. So there've been a lot of changes in how track lighting is designed and installed in homes. So it helps keep this nice, modern, clean look and finish. And that's used a lot when you're trying to do accent lighting like artwork or dining room tables or other types of structures in the house that you're on highlight. And then linear lighting, like that tape lighting, has been used in a lot of more modern homes where behind these specific areas like we see here with the bathtub and up on the ceiling, we can hide some linear lighting in that space to kind of illuminate it in a subtle way, but it kind of blends in with the design. Decorative lamps, again, they kind of serve their purpose. They add this design element to the space, but still kind of serve as a functional aspect, specifically for reading or conversation. And sometimes if we're using a lighting control system, we can, turn on and off some of these different layers of light, which allows you to add another dramatic effect to the space. And then another area we're seeing a big trend specifically because of the advancements in WRGB tape is the shelving and joinery lighting, where we have this bookcase, or it could be a trophy case or any type of bookcase where a client's trying to highlight, some of their awards or other things in their office space. And we can actually use the tape to kind of highlight different areas. We also see this a lot in closets as well. Again, lots of planning has to go involved in this because we have to make sure that the LED tape has the right room and has the electrical requirements to integrate with the design of the shelving system. And color changing. So I talked on it a little bit. Lots of advancements in color changing technology, not just with LED tapes, but there's actually fixtures now that can do color changing, WRGB, but also they can do tunable white, which we're going to talk about. But we do this a lot in some of the entertainment spaces that we design for. So, theaters, game rooms, media rooms. This is a really good example of that type of space. This is actually someone's house where we've done WRGB tape lighting, in the coffers, and now we're actually doing them inside of I don't think we have it in this example, but the countertops of a bar or kitchen where we can light up that stone, which is really, really cool. And there's a lot of things you can do. We see clients that literally paint walls with color with some of the products that we offer, and you can tie that into scenes. So again, when you bring the technology element, hitting an entertainment scene can put a splash of blue on a wall, and then it can go back to just standard lighting, for daily use. Daylight and shading. So often overlooked is how we can use natural light to also illuminate the space, and we can control that through automated shades. So again, using technology, shades can be set on timers to kind of raise and lower with the natural sunrise and sunset. We can also adjust them to scenes. So for an entertainment scene or for a work scene, but having motorized shades in the house allows us to bring in that natural light and bring a whole new type of lighting element to the space. So talk a little bit about light quality. So, again, I mentioned it earlier, we see a lot of these really high-end expensive homes that get spec'd with in-ceiling lights, and they're really, really cheap, poor quality fixtures. And the problem is there's not enough education that's out there. So again, that scenario of that client picking a high-end stone or granite for their floors or for their countertops, putting a really inexpensive light fixture in there with a low quality LED is going to dramatically change how that product looks. I mean, I've been on projects where stones had to get ripped out because the client was just so dissatisfied. But again, they were looking at it outside under natural light versus inside. So light quality is a really big deal. First thing you want to look at, and I'm not a lighting designer, but we'll just kind of touch on some tech specs, lumens versus lux. Lumens is really, the overall brightness of the fixture. It's just one element you want to look at. It's not certainly the singular element. Just because it has a lot of lumens doesn't mean it's the right fixture. You want to find the right fixture for the right job, or, whether it's a task light or ambient light. And then there's also this lux parameter. Lux is really more focused on the amount of light for a singular area. And so it's used more in the commercial space where they're trying to highlight specific areas of in an office or common area. But lumens is really the one thing you want to look for when you're looking out for overall brightness. And then there's beam angles. And so beam angles is really the spread of the light source and what it's going to cover. And there's 45-degree beam angles, there's 90-degree beam angles, and there's everything in between. I'm going to play this quick video here so you can kind of see some of the differences as we adjust this light in the center with a very narrow beam angle. Instead of lighting up that entire table, we can use that light just to light the vase that's in the middle. So again, it brings a totally different, element and vibe to the space when we do that. If we just had a wide beam angle on that fixture, it would just light up that entire, table or possibly the entire room, which is not the look that we're trying to go for. So color temperature. So this is something you've probably been hearing about. Again, there's bulbs and fixtures that are now incorporating adjustable color temperature. So what we want to understand is really what that means. So typically most bulbs, if you're buying something that's a fixed Kelvin temperature, it's going to be 2,700 or 3,000. This is what is closest to like a standard incandescent light, which is what we've used for a number of years. When you get up into the 3,500 and higher, this is where it starts to get a little stale and sterile and almost like artificial, like fluorescent lights. I don't know what the Kelvin temperature is, but they're pretty high. And then daylight is, much higher than what most people anticipate, 5,500 to 6,500, which sounds great, but you may not want daylight in your house all the time. And then again, the higher you get, the more bluer it gets. I forget what the color temperature is of like an emergency room, but there was a client once they were doctors, husband and wife, and they literally wanted that Kelvin temperature in their kitchen because that's what they're used to, even though that would totally freak me out. But that's kind of where color temperature falls into play. Now, an incandescent light, when you dim it, it gets warmer as it dims, and that's the nature of an incandescent. So even if an incandescent starts out at 3,500, as you dim it, the Kelvin temperature shifts and it gets down into that 2,200 to 2,700. Not all LEDs dim like that. And so you might have heard of a warm glow LED. Different companies have different names for them, but that's an LED that can change its Kelvin temperature as it dims. So it's acting like an incandescent. A standard LED, especially really inexpensive ones, if you dim them, they just get less bright and they actually get very gray. And that's where if you're dimming that light like that over like a piece of countertop, it can really make it look bad. So color temperature plays a huge role in how it's going to look in the space. So circadian rhythm. So we all have an internal time clock called our circadian rhythm. It's what helps wake us up in the morning, helps us go to sleep at night. And light is a big impact on that. So when you're around those warmer, glowing, lower Kelvin temperature type lights, it actually, your body starts stimulating melatonin or producing melatonin, and that's what makes you sleepy at night. That's why they say like stay away from these devices because of the blue light. Well, that bright blue natural light wakes you up and it keeps your body from actually producing melatonin. So there's been lots of studies on this, and because of the advent and technologies with lights, we can now take a light fixture that is able to do full WRGB or maybe just tunable white without colors, and it can actually shift the Kelvin temperatures throughout the day. So the client could have a light fixture in their house that actually follows this cycle. So when they get up in the morning during the week, it's at a set Kelvin temperature, and that Kelvin temperature shifts throughout the day to coincide with your body's natural wake-sleep cycle. Now, this has been used, it's starting to become very big in the residential space. Previously, it was used a lot in commercial, and believe it or not, was used to get productivity out of employees. So in the afternoon, they would shift the Kelvin temperature to a higher amount, so be more like natural daylight. And of course, that wakes people up. So it was used from a productivity standpoint, but it's used a lot in houses now. And there is a wellness element. You know, if your body can follow that natural wake sleep cycle, it's going to help promote health and wellness. But there's also the benefits of you know, the way it lights a space and complementing some of your finishes that we talked about earlier. So when it comes to quality, one of the biggest determining factors is called the CRI rating, or color rendering index. So you'll see these numbers thrown around. What I will tell you is typically if they're not putting a CRI rating on the bulb or fixture, it's probably very low. 90 to 95 CRI is really what you're looking for a high quality fixture. Anything below 80 is not going to be a very good quality fixture. So the CRI, color rendering index, is basically the ability for that fixture or bulb to accurately reproduce these colors on the left-hand side. And this is more of a natural light color palette versus the artificial colors, you know, the standard red, green, blue, yellow. But something that's higher than 90 means it can accurately reproduce these colors across the spectrum. That's important if a client's looking at, you know, we have clients that spend, you know, tens of thousands of dollars on art, and then they're going to put this cheap light fixture above it. That's going to be a poor quality light fixture, and it's going to change the way the art looks. Early on, when, you know, adjustable circadian rhythm tunable white light was first being introduced, a lot of fixture companies would say, listen, we can create the Kelvin temperature of the candle that Van Gogh used to do the painting, right? So literally, you know, use the light source he used to actually create the painting. And some clients gravitate towards that. But color render index is a really good determining factor of how high of a quality light fixture you have. So think of this. Someone goes to use a really cheap quality fixture. That means it's not only not accurate at reproducing whether it's color or just the color temperature, it won't be accurate between each fixture. So if you put, you know, 8 cheap hi-hats in a room with a low CRI, chances are the differences between each light bulb will be bad. And you've probably been in a space where you're like looking around like, wow, the light actually looks different around the room. And that's because it's a really low CRI rating. So this is a good example of a low CRI rating. So the left is 80. And at first glance, it looks good. But if you look at the far right, you can see we have a much higher CRI, like a 98. So now we actually see the real colors of that flower. And you can see just the overall definition of the vase and the petals. So it makes a really, really big difference when you're looking at artifacts, for sure. So how to plan for integrated lighting. So if you're looking at, you know, in this example, we have a lot of WRGB accents. Again, bring in a systems integrator as early as possible. We will work closely with the electricians and the designer. Sometimes designers have a lighting designer, but there's 2 elements. There's actually coming up with the lighting plan and designing, you know, the task lighting, the ambient lighting. But if we're going to have control over it, we really want to involve the systems designer so we can help design the lighting control system that's going to make sense. And all that comes down to design documentation. So a lot of times we're working with the client, we're working with the electrician and the designer. We'll take the lighting plans, and from here we can count up the amount of loads we need to control and also produce drawings for permitting for the lighting control system. And we don't get into it in this course. We have a whole nother course that talks about the differences in lighting control systems. There's systems that are called centralized, where there's panels at a head end. and everything's home run from a wiring perspective, that allows us to actually reduce the amount of keypads on a wall from 8 to 1. And then there's just standard lighting control, which is using the conventional wiring in a house, and we can put smart switches in to be able to control the various aspects of the lighting. But it all starts with the documentation. With something like this, so if you're involved in a project very early and you have these plans, we can work with you to come up with a design. Planning starts early. As I said, we can never get involved too early because you know, people think we're low voltage, we can come in later, or because everything's wireless, we can just, you know, plan for that later. And we can't stress enough that getting involved early allows us to do a number of things, helping make sure the proper infrastructure is there, regardless of what the client wants to choose, whether we're talking about lighting or TVs. We can put infrastructure that's going to allow us to, you know, make those decisions later. And then when it comes to some of these other technologies, we might have to suggest different types of framing, ventilation. You know, there's a lot of things that play an important role in the design. If we get brought in too late, our actual choices on solutions gets narrowed substantially. So we are approaching the end. We talked about some of the residential systems and their unique qualities, the benefits of technology related to energy efficiency and timelines. Somebody put the wrong slide in here. I'm just noticing this. This is actually a slide from the other lighting control course, so I apologize. But we talked about the different types of lighting techniques like accent lighting, ambient lighting, decorative lighting, task lighting. And then we also talked about some of the other design parameters like layering. We talked about CRIs. We talked about WRGB and the circadian rhythm. And then we also did talk about engaging the timeline for bringing in a systems integrator. And with that, I'm going to see if we have any questions. No questions.
That's not true. There aren't no questions.
Well, on the virtual ones, there tend to not be a lot of questions, which is
Oh,
okay.
that's because they can't see all the hands.
Go ahead,
Judith, yeah, Judith has a
I
question.
can't. Sorry, I couldn't.
Phoebe and I were wondering, when you were talking about lux and lumens, we were remembering foot candles from the good old days. And also, isn't there a lighting flux as well? And
There's a lot of, yeah, again, I'm not a lighting designer and I'm not a lighting expert. I believe foot candles has to do with lumens. I think there's a correlation there. I think foot candles was the way it was measured previously, and then you can convert that to lumens. There's a few other parameters. I don't think a lot of those matter. For me, like, you know, lumens is the overall output. So if you're looking at accent lighting to light a room and it's 14 feet by 15 feet and it's an 18-foot tall ceiling, there's going to be a certain amount of lumen output you want from the fixture. Lux is really not used in residential and not really important. So lumens is really the big deal. And then to me, CRI is especially with LEDs, you know, LEDs have been the fastest adopted technology in our space, but there's no regulations over it. So you know, when we have to dim those LEDs, that's another thing. And I didn't bring it up, is we want to be involved early because we want to make sure that even if the client wants to go with inexpensive fixtures, like, let's make sure there's a really good controllable LED, because the worst is when we put in a control system and we dim it and at like 20% that thing starts flickering, and that's because it's a really, really bad LED. So CRI and lumens is probably the biggest things. Without being an expert, like, those are things at least all of us could use to determine if something's like a high quality light bulb or fixture.
Okay. There was something else I was thinking, I lost it.
Fernando, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, so I had another question. The state of California regulates LED light bulbs. They have to have a CRI of at least 90 and something else. Does that mean that every light bulb you buy meets California standards? Or, I have a feeling if I go into Safeway and buy a light bulb, that they don't care at all what the standards are. Is that, I don't know which is true though.
That's a good question. I don't know for sure. I'll make a comment and then I'll defer to Fernando because I live in Miami. And then we don't have that title, but I believe that's with new construction and coding. So when you go into new construction and you're doing permitting and it has to pass code, those bulbs have to be, I don't know how they manage that, but I don't know. Fernando, do you have anything you want to contribute?
Just kind of like what you said, if you're going to be a contractor and it's going to get approved, then you're going to have to plan those fixtures and the accompanying bulbs that meet that requirement to kind of pass. But as a homeowner, a lot of people will change it out afterwards if they don't like it, or like you said, it's not prohibited to sell them at a store, but as a contractor to kind of pass and get it approved, you'll have to specify and install them to that spec.
Have them online and have them shipped to California.
That's not the same thing. We were just saying that they won't ship them to California.
Oh, really?
If they're not compliant, they won't ship them into the state if you buy them online.
Right, but
wow.
I think there are plenty of them on the store shelves that they don't tell you what the CRI is. You just, I would assume what you say is that they're somewhere around 82.
Yeah, if they don't say it, they're usually in the 80s. So yeah, it's the whole shipping it in is, that's like other things that are not, you're not allowed to ship them in because then they could prove that they actually sold it, I guess. I don't know. So yeah, my understanding with most of those things is it's just from the permitting, like somebody told me the other day in Florida, if you put a generator in your house, it has to be a whole house generator now, which seems odd because those things are huge, but I think that's only for new construction. Like if I go buy a generator, I can put whatever I want in my house.
Yeah, that's probably what we've got. Okay.
Great question. If there are no others, I know Fernando wanted to kind of show you a couple projects that they did related to lighting control, but certainly if any other questions come up as we go through, we'll just got a couple of slides and then we'll kind of be done. And if you have other questions outside of what we talked about today from lighting control, anything technology related, feel free to fire away. But Fernando, did you want to talk through the slides and I'll kind of trigger them for you?
Yeah, this is just one example, more focused on lighting control. I mean, you can kind of see some ambient lighting there in the background and some light control with the automated shades that they have there for those windows. But anyway, this replaces probably 3 or 4 different switches for this area. It's a family room and a kitchen. So if you kind of, I don't know if you can zoom in, but you can kind of see those buttons there relate to scenes. We try to do, things that are going to be activities more than just function, like turn on the kitchen. This isn't a great example of that, but like the relax scene, which is a second button, you kind of see there as something that, dims the light to preset levels in certain areas.
Orange one.
Yeah.
Was there a question?
No.
So that gives you an example of how, when the house is finished, how some of these different lighting loads can be controlled when they're properly planned. So this keypad replaces several keypads for different loads in the house.
Yeah, and I think probably one of the big takeaways is this is not a conventionally wired house, so that's what they call a low voltage keypad, and it talks to a module that's located elsewhere that actually has the 110 volts to it. So, these systems get put in a lot to reduce that keypad clutter on the wall, but we have to be involved early to plan for that because the electrician's going to have to wire the house a specific way.
Yep.
If we don't get brought in early, we've seen projects where houses had to get rewired because that's what the client wanted, but there just wasn't a lot of good communication on that.
Right.
So this is where planning comes in.
Yeah, and I actually have one drawing at the end from a house that we're working on right now in Atherton. That's exactly that. Just to show, I didn't have a picture for this house. This is like a 3-level house, 3-story house in San Francisco, but all the actual light switches are in the closets. They're hidden. So all you see in the various rooms are the keypads. You don't have 4 or 5 switches. All the actual physical switches are in a closet tucked away. This one is just really an example of how to meet that aesthetic. If you look very closely in that left-hand side by the door, you can kind of notice the keypad there is, black with a black trim around it. That's something that you get with these kind of high-end lighting control systems. It's just not the performance and the functionality. You also get to match a design and aesthetic that the interior designer is trying to achieve. So you have, different finishes as well. This is another example of a keypad that's controlling lights for reading. There's one on each side of the bed. So you can have it for reading. You can have a night light for the bathroom. There's one actually that control the shades, the motorized shades in this room as well. So just another example of controlling many different lights. My favorite part about this house is they have so many different lights, but they can basically turn off the whole house with one button from the garage. So there's a keypad right by the garage, is when they leave, they can just house off, and dozens and dozens of light loads can just be switched off from as you exit or enter the home. So that's very convenient for them. This is actually, if you zoom in a little bit, I don't know if you can zoom here, Jason, maybe to that left-hand side. No,
PowerPoint doesn't allow me to zoom.
Okay,
well, hold
that's
on.
fine. So Jason, while he's doing that, Jason spoke a lot about coming in a little too late. So we came in a little late here. The house is already framed. Yeah, a little bit more. And if you notice, this is where we know you need our help. So if you see the light switches there, the dollar signs on the far right, that's a lot of switches to have in a room. Like this room, there's like 4 there, 4 on the top. They're all over the place. So we're simplifying this, and we're basically doing keypads like you saw in the previous pictures. We're putting all the physical switches in a closet somewhere to be determined. But this is something right now where there's like 7 loads just for the kitchen. I actually found tape lights in the kitchen that they hadn't even connected to a switch, because they just have so much light going on here. So our goal here is to simplify and to automate, so you're not having to manipulate 5 different switches as you walk around the room and set it up for entertaining. This area you're looking at is half of the house that's mostly for entertaining. So having a design that's able to automate those functions and make it, so you can focus on actually using the space for what you want to, instead of actually getting it set up.
Yeah, I mean, if you're sitting in those chairs, your view at that kitchen, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. You can see about 12, more than that. I mean, yeah, that's a lot of switches. So that really takes away from the design.
I spent 2 hours alone with the homeowner last night, just going over all the keypad locations and how they're going to be used. So it's very involved, and that's why the earlier is the better. Thankfully, we're not too late. I'm literally going there this afternoon to see what the progress is. But earlier is better. You get better performance at lower cost, and ultimately a better solution for the homeowner that they're going to be happy with. So I'll drop my contact information. I know we're kind of running low on time, but my phone number has changed, and it's a different email. So I'll just drop that in the chat. If anybody has any questions or wants to reach out, feel free to do so.
Dave has a question.
Yeah, I'd love to know what the kind of current thinking is and the evolution of PoE lights.
So like power over Ethernet?
Yeah.
So I haven't seen a lot of them used in my work. We use a lot of PoE for like surveillance cameras, for like Wi-Fi access points. So my concern is I don't know that the market is there yet with, I mean, as far as the switching technology, like the switches that we use are specific like wattage loads that they can handle for these types of devices. I think for the PoE lights, you're probably forced to just have something that injects like a wall wart that you plug into the wall and injects for that run of wire going. But I haven't seen a lot of PoE lighting and stuff that we had. I don't know if Jason out in Florida you have.
No, I mean, I hear about it and I see a little bit. We don't directly sell it, but a lot of that is either, if it's coming from a network switch, then you have to budget for that PoE, right? So like a 12-port network switch can only put out so much power. But I think it's cool technology, and the ability to get rid of Romex in a house is very interesting. I don't know if it's fully there yet. I know projects that have done it. I just don't know enough about it to speak about it.
Yeah, I think the most expensive part is, you're right, like I was saying before, is the switch. The switches are expensive and they have limited ports and capacity. So I maybe for like a room or a couple of rooms, a great room or a remodel, I think it would make sense. But are you seeing in any of your projects, Dave? Are customers looking for it? Or
yeah, we have a new house that we're building, passive house, and it's all PoE, and we're having to work really hard to find well, us, the client and the lighting designer are working really hard to try to find California compatible PoE lights that give the client the ability to control them the way he wants them controlled. So just wondering if you guys had any insight.
Are they looking for color changing or WRGB or?
This is a really easy question. Yes, for everything.
Okay.
He's controlling everything. This place is going to have, miles and miles and miles of Cat 6, Cat 7. So
There's a company, I have no experience with them. We don't sell them, called Color Beam. That's very well known out there, that makes color changing lights. I know they've done full scale houses. I don't really know much about them, but it's a pretty big company, started out of Canada.
Okay.
So you might want to look at them.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah.